The first time, she stole my table. I don't think it was a premeditated crime, but that's exactly how it looked. There was a torrential downpour, the cafe was packed to the brim, and I made the classic mistake. I left my jacket on the back of a chair to save my spot while I stood in line. I sincerely believed in the unwritten moral code of strangers respecting property rights, but as it turned out, jurisprudence in cafes works differently. Returning with my order, I found a girl sitting calmly in my seat. My jacket was neatly folded and resting on the neighboring chair, like an extra witness. The moment I approached, she looked up and smiled, not flirtatiously, not even guiltily, but with such disarming calm, as if I had accidentally wandered into her personal office. "That was my chair," I stated, stopping at the edge of the table. She shifted her gaze to the jacket, then back to me. "Oh, it seems the situation is becoming awkward." "That depends on how attached you've grown to this piece of furniture over the last 5 minutes." She laughed shortly. The sound was light and quick. Picking up my jacket, she held it out to me, ready to retreat, but the rain outside was lashing so furiously, and the free seats in the cafe were so conspicuously absent, that even the barista gave us a meaningful look in the spirit of, "Please don't make me break up a fight over a stool today." "Actually," I hesitated, "if you don't mind, we could share the territory?" Joint custody of a table? Legally, that sounds dubious, but I agree. And so I found myself face to face with a stranger. As raindrops drummed against the window, I tried to focus on my coffee and phone, but unsuccessfully. Sitting in close proximity, I involuntarily noticed details. Her book was covered in margin notes. The handwriting was neat and somehow annoyingly attractive. Each time she turned a page, she would tuck a strand of dark hair behind her ear with a habitual gesture. And her coffee order was so complex and layered that I simultaneously felt sympathy for her and mild skepticism. "Are you judging me?" she suddenly asked, catching my gaze on her cup. "That depends on whether that's a beverage or your official statement to society." That sounds like criticism from someone who drinks black coffee out of pure stubbornness. More like a remark from someone who doesn't confuse coffee with dessert. She laughed again, and the ice was finally broken. We talked for about 10 minutes, about the rain, about the strange music playing in the cafe, about the tragic energy of that guy with the umbrella by the window. When her phone buzzed, she started gathering her things. "Try not to steal furniture from the civilian population anymore," I advised her. "And you try not to mark territory with outerwear. It's a morally weak gesture." She left, leaving behind the scent of spices and a strange feeling of incompleteness. I was sure this was one of those fleeting encounters that fade from memory after a couple of days. But the next morning, I saw her again, on the bus. This was beyond simple statistics. The bus was crowded, stuffy, and the driver braked as if he had a personal vendetta against the laws of inertia. I was standing, gripping the handrail, pondering why mornings start so early, when at the university stop, she stepped through the door. The same hair, the same features, but a different coat and a different book. Our eyes met. I expected confusion, but she smiled as if we were now officially part of each other's morning routine. "You again," she observed, appearing in the crowd next to me. I'm still analyzing. Is this a coincidence or a targeted campaign to stalk me? I haven't yet decided on the level of my vindictiveness over yesterday's incident. Her presence felt surprisingly natural. When the bus swerved sharply around a corner, she maintained her balance with that irritated grace that marked her as a veteran of public transportation. "Do you always take this route?" I asked. "That sounds like the beginning of a dossier." "That sounds like an attempt to understand why I keep running into you twice a day." "Maybe you're just very attentive to details," she parried as she got off at her stop. "Try not to lose any more tables." I spent the rest of the ride wondering what the odds were of meeting someone twice in a metropolis. And by Sunday, probability had finally surrendered to reality. I was standing in the supermarket, in the dry goods aisle, with a basket full of food that any nutritionist would consider a declaration of war on health. Turning into the pasta aisle, I froze. She was standing right there, studying the shelves with that expression people get when the universe starts repeating itself a little too obviously. We both stopped. She laughed first, quietly, helplessly, acknowledging that this coincidence had crossed into the realm of pattern. "No," she said, shaking her head. "This is aggressive marketing on fate's part." On the bus, it was strange. Now it's just suspicious. "Do you always buy pasta at this time, or are you here because you knew about my emotional vulnerability to carbohydrates?" She adjusted the basket on her shoulder and looked at me differently. Warmer, without the usual armor of irony. "I suppose we've ceased to be complete strangers." And she was right. After the table, the bus, and the pasta aisle, something had arisen between us that required no formal introductions. Yvonne, that was her name. We stood in the dry goods aisle, and I understood one very inconvenient thing. I had started getting used to the idea that she might appear at any moment. And, even worse, I had started looking forward to it. After our encounter in the pasta aisle, I honestly tried to convince myself of 3 things. First, 3 meetings were still a statistical anomaly, not divine providence. Second, I wasn't thinking about Yvonne too much for a person whose knowledge of her was limited to a name, a complicated coffee order, and a suspicious talent for appearing in my field of vision. And third, if I saw her again, I would behave like a mature, balanced adult, not like a witness to extraterrestrial contact. Of course, the universe unilaterally rejected all 3 points. I saw her on Tuesday, in the university library. But it wasn't a dramatic collision in the doorway. I noticed her through the long, panoramic window separating the stairwell from the reading room. Yvonne was sitting at one of the lower tables, her pen clenched between her teeth in concentration, surrounded by 3 open volumes, as if she were personally about to pass judgment on all of classical literature. I froze. Not dramatically, I just stumbled in my step, and at that moment, she looked up. That was the craziest part. Not that I had noticed her, but that she had felt my gaze through the glass, the distance, and all the layers of academic silence. Yvonne took the pen out of her mouth, paused for a second, and then waved her hand at me almost imperceptibly, so casually, as if our spatial intersections were now part of the official schedule. I smirked and returned a short gesture. That should have been the end of it. However, 10 minutes later, when I was already trying to force my brain to focus on notes at the other end of the building, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number read, "This is starting to smack of arrogance." I stared at the screen in bewilderment. Me. Who is this? Yvonne. Yvonne, the girl from the cafe, the girl from the bus, the girl from the supermarket. Try to keep up. I froze, covering my face with my hand. This was decidedly impossible. Me. How do you have my number? Yvonne. The cafe has a loyalty app. You left your screen on when you paid. Your privacy survival instincts deserve a failing grade. There was nothing reassuring about that answer, but somehow it made me smile. Me. That borders on criminal code. Yvonne. It's called efficiency. And don't flatter yourself. I only remembered the name because it seemed familiar after our pasta incident. The entire day passed under the sign of this digital invasion. Messages arrived in short bursts, neatly dismantling my concentration. She commented on the guy across from her who was highlighting text so furiously he seemed to be trying to erase it. Complained about the vending machine with its morally obsolete sandwiches, and claimed I looked like someone making very displeased margin notes. By evening, Yvonne had become something more than just a random passerby. She had become a voice in my pocket, turning the city's chaos into our own little personal series. Wednesday made the situation even more irreversible. I was standing in line for coffee before a lecture when I heard a familiar, ironic tone behind me. If this is the same coffee chain, I'm filing an official complaint about the monotony of the universe. I turned around. Yvonne was standing in a dark coat, her bag slung over her shoulder, looking at me as if she had long ago chosen amusement over surprise. This is becoming statistically implausible, I observed. That sounds like someone trying very hard not to look pleased. More like a man seeing a woman enjoying the moment a little too openly. She got in line behind me. "You don't understand how this looks from my side," she said. "Every time I see you, you have that face like you've been caught at a crime scene. Because that's exactly it. We're both caught in this something." When it was my turn, without thinking, I ordered her favorite iced caramel something or other, along with my coffee. Yvonne tilted her head, watching me. "That sounded dangerously close to planning," she observed, taking the cup. "That's self-defense. If we're doomed to keep colliding, I need pattern efficiency." She looked at me, first seriously, and then her gaze softened. She smiled that same soft smile that immediately punched holes in my schedule for the day. And that was the main problem. We had stopped being strangers who accidentally shared a table in the rain. We had started becoming a system. Not just seeing each other, but continuing the conversation from where we'd left off last time, as if life refused to hit the reset button between our meetings. Coincidences are fun, but a pattern is the beginning of expectation. And by the end of that week, I realized with terrifying clarity that I was looking forward to the next random encounter far more than any sane person should. There is a certain moment when a stranger ceases to be just a face in the crowd and becomes a constant in your life. It happens even before you officially admit your mutual attraction, and long before your plans become shared. It's a frightening stage of awareness for which I was prepared neither administratively nor morally. The problem was that by the start of the second week, Yvonne had somehow inexplicably taken up residence in the attics of my subconscious. I still didn't know her address, her favorite color, or her opinion on late-period Radiohead. But I knew other things. Those small, intimate details that accumulate when you keep running into the same person in the scenery of a big city. I knew how the angle of her smile changed when she was being ironic about herself. I knew that she automatically stirred her coffee even 10 minutes after the sugar had dissolved. And, most dangerously, I had learned the sound of my own mood, which improved rapidly the moment I spotted her silhouette at the end of the street. This shouldn't have been legal at such an early stage of acquaintance. The first time I caught myself in the act was on a Thursday. It was a typically bad day. A test I'd studied for half asleep, a seminar where everyone spoke the language of synergy and efficient case studies, and rain, gray, sticky, as if specifically ordered by the city to enhance the melancholy. I was walking through the covered walkway by the tram stop, feeling like a soaked supermarket receipt. And then, I saw her, under the awning of a newsstand. The same dark coat, her hair down, her umbrella folded but still dripping onto the asphalt. My body reacted before I could formulate a single coherent thought, as if a switch had flipped inside, and the world around became a couple of degrees warmer. That was a bad sign. It meant she had ceased to be that girl from the cafe, and had become Yvonne, a person whose presence corrects reality. "You look like both education and the weather have betrayed you simultaneously," she observed as I approached. "That's a bit too personal for a simple hello." "That's because you're becoming predictable. I'm starting to read you like an open book, in very large print." A frightening phrase. "You're doing everything to make me say it." This was our new rhythm, light, mocking, but with each passing time, denser. We walked in the same direction, not because we had agreed, but because neither of us expressed any desire to interrupt this random coincidence. Stopping at an intersection to wait for the green light, Yvonne suddenly looked at me and said, "You always carry your bag on your left shoulder." I blinked. "What?" "I just noticed. You keep shifting it to your left, even if you pick it up with your right hand. You're talking about this as if I were a rare bird species you're observing. That sounds logical. You keep appearing in my field of vision, after all. In that second, I understood. We were both doing it. We were both noticing details, fragments of habits, building files on each other. With anyone else, this would have seemed strange, almost spy-like behavior. But with Yvonne, it felt like recognition. On Tuesday, the situation finally spiraled out of control. I was late for a lecture, genuinely, with that feeling of doom where every traffic light seems like your personal enemy. Running to the crosswalk by the arts building, I saw her on the opposite side. She was standing there with 2 cups of coffee in her hands, watching the stream of cars with that same imperturbable calm that I both hated and loved in her. Our eyes met. Yvonne smiled almost imperceptibly, and all my lateness instantly faded into the background. When I crossed the street, she simply held out one of the cups. "What's this?" I was out of breath. "Coffee. I bought 2. By accident, probably." "Yvonne, no one buys 2 cups of coffee by accident, right where another person you keep running into might walk past." That sounds like an accusation from someone trying to preserve the remnants of an alibi. I took the cup. It was hot, aromatic, and exactly the way I liked it. "Did you buy it because you hoped to run into me?" I asked, looking her straight in the eye. "Would that be so strange?" She tilted her head. "You didn't choose this route by accident either, even though going through the park is 2 minutes faster." That was checkmate in 3 moves. Later that same day, my friend Mira, who possessed the intuition of a hungry predator, found me in the student center. "You're scanning the entrances," she announced, sitting down across from me. "What? No." "You've looked at the door 6 times in the last 2 minutes. That's not just because. That's the stage of pre-relational stalking. You're not on a date yet, but your nervous system has already chosen its master." It was a cruel and outrageously accurate description of my state. I had started looking for her without even realizing it. I scanned for her favorite table by the window in the cafe. I searched for the familiar dark coat at the tram stop. This was no longer a series of amusing coincidences. It was a hunt, where we were both the hunters and the prey. The city had begun to organize itself around her. Every street, every bookstore became a potential stage for our next encounter. And the most awkward part was that I no longer wanted these encounters to be random. I saw her again at sunset. It was no longer strange. It was necessary. And if she hadn't appeared at the library entrance that evening, I think I would have felt, for the first time in my life, that the city had deceived me. But she was there, and she was smiling as if she knew. I had come here for that very smile. The real crisis came on Monday, when I didn't see her. Until that moment, I had been comforting myself with the illusion that I was still in control of the situation. But Yvonne's absence from the usual city scenery affected me as if the main character had suddenly been cut from a film, leaving the audience to stare at empty backdrops. I went to our regular cafe. She wasn't there. Walk past the bookstore? Empty. Even at the tram stop at our illegal time of 5:20 p.m., only gloomy strangers stood, having nothing to do with architecture or ironic commentary. The city had suddenly become too spacious and defiantly quiet. That was when I understood. The coincidences were over. Dependence had begun. Everything came to a head on Tuesday, in the most absurd way possible. I was standing at the stop by the park, trying simultaneously to listen to a podcast and not think about the fact that my evening plans amounted to eating processed food. A tram pulled up. I reached for my transit card. It slipped from my frozen fingers and slid dramatically across the asphalt, right under the feet of the crowd. While I, cursing under my breath, fished it out from under someone's boots, the doors closed, and the tram indifferently rolled away. That was an epic defeat, came a familiar voice behind me. I turned around too quickly. Yvonne was standing a few steps away, hiding her chin in the high collar of her coat. In her eyes danced those same little devils that usually heralded another dose of observational violence. "You saw that?" "I had the best seats in the house," she nodded at the display. "Next one in 18 minutes. That's not just waiting, that's a hole in your biography." I sighed resignedly. "You missed it too, didn't you?" "I didn't miss it, I just got distracted watching your battle with plastic and gravity." We stood in the light drizzle, and 18 minutes in such conditions felt like an eternity. "Listen," I pointed to a small bakery around the corner. "Inside, it smells like sugar and social tolerance. Let's wait out this infrastructure collapse in there?" Yvonne looked at me, then at the empty tracks. "Okay, but only if we don't discuss your coordination." Inside was warm and smelled of cinnamon. We took a table by the window, the very one that seemed to have been waiting for us. It was the first time we sat across from each other without haste, without closing bus doors, and without needing to rush off somewhere. "You know," I began, studying the foam on my coffee, "this is our first real conversation without a built-in escape route." "Does that sound like a complaint or a statement of fact?" She raised an eyebrow. "More like an admission that the city has finally stopped nudging us and decided to see what we'll do on our own." Yvonne set down her cup and looked at me seriously. "The city has been exceeding its quota lately. You do realize we've officially crossed the line from random passers-by?" "I realized that when Mira called me your ghost stalker." She laughed, this time genuinely warmly, and in this bakery, to the hum of the coffee machine, we finally began filling in the gaps. I learned that she had gone into architecture because buildings are too arrogant and need to be put in their place. She learned that my political science degree was an attempt to understand why people negotiate so poorly when everyone has a language. "So that's where those suspicious eyebrows come from," she concluded. "You're just constantly analyzing other people's lies." "It's not analysis, it's professional deformation." "That makes you a very difficult conversationalist, Sam." We missed one tram, then a second. Neither of us looked at the time. The conversation flowed on its own, jumping from her younger brother, who only sends messages and emojis, to my culinary disasters. And then came a pause. One of those pauses that either ruins everything or decides everything. Yvonne looked out the window at the darkening street. "You know," she said quietly, "I was looking for you too." Something inside me stopped. On Wednesday? On Wednesday. And on Monday. I even walked through the political science building, even though I have absolutely no business there. And it was humiliating for my self-esteem. I smiled, feeling the last drops of adult composure evaporate. "I waited for you by the library entrance for an extra half hour, pretending to read the exam schedule I know by heart." "We're both idiots, aren't we?" She finally looked at me. "Completely. But it seems to be mutual." Yvonne reached across the table and touched my palm for a moment. Very briefly, but it was enough for the world outside the bakery to cease to exist. "So we're not going to pretend anymore that the city is bringing us together?" "No," I shook my head. "Enough blaming the transportation system." We left the bakery when the streetlights had already come on outside. At the platform, before getting on her, this time definitely her, tram, Yvonne turned around. "You know, Sam, I'm glad you dropped that card." "Me too, but next time, let's just meet at 6, without the gravity drama." She smiled that same soft smile I now knew better than my geopolitics notes. "At 6, by the park entrance, and try not to be late. I might find myself another table." As the tram carried her away into the darkness, I remained standing on the platform. The coincidences were over. Reality had begun, and it was far better than any accident. The transition from random encounters to planned dates is like going from amateur phone footage to a full-scale 4K production. The stakes are higher, the equipment is more complex, and any mistake in the frame is much more visible. I spent the entire Thursday in a state of mild system failure. When you rely on chance, you always have an alibi. You weren't trying, you just happened to be nearby. But when you agree to meet at 6 in the evening by the park entrance, you officially step onto the stage. You declare, "I want to see you." And that admission makes you vulnerable, like an old computer without antivirus software. I arrived 10 minutes early, of course, because a man who had spent 3 weeks pretending to be unflappable simply had to compensate with a 10-minute wait in the cold wind, nervously adjusting his bag on his left shoulder, the very one she had so kindly scanned. The park that evening looked provocatively romantic, which only heightened my skepticism. Streetlights, a light mist, couples in love who, unlike us, clearly hadn't built their relationship on pasta incidents and transportation collapses. Yvonne appeared at exactly 6:03 p.m. She was walking from the direction of the avenue, and I again caught myself as my mood made a sharp leap upward, ignoring all laws of common sense. She was wearing the same dark coat, but today she looked different. Maybe it was because she wasn't hiding her face in her collar, but looking straight at me, having spotted my premature arrival from a distance. "10 minutes, Sam?" she said instead of a greeting, coming close. "Your composure level is approaching 0. "I was just testing the reliability of the city's infrastructure in this area," I parried. "And by the way, a 3-minute lateness is also a kind of manifesto." "That was an endurance test, and you passed, even though you look like you're preparing for a dissertation defense, not a walk." We started walking along the path, and it was strange. For the first time, our movement had no destination. We didn't need to go to the library, the tram, or the grocery store. We just needed to be here. And this emptiness in our plans was suddenly filled with deafening awkwardness. "You know what I've realized?" Yvonne broke the silence. "That we made a strategic mistake by depriving ourselves of the cover of coincidence?" "Exactly. It's much easier for us to talk when the city puts us in stupid situations. But when we just walk through a beautiful park, we turn into 2 characters from a bad novel who forgot their lines." To salvage the situation, we decided to head toward the embankment, where small street fairs usually open this time of year. Along the way, the city, as if hearing our complaints about the too perfect atmosphere, decided to add its 2 cents. First, we were nearly run over by a group of teenagers on electric scooters, forcing me to literally pull Yvonne aside. Then we ran into a street musician performing a cover of Creep with such anguish that it sounded more like a cry for help than art. "There it is," Yvonne pointed at the musician. "Tragic energy is back, balance restored." The city won't let us relax. It seems to think that if we stop suffering, our magic will evaporate. We stopped at a hot cider stand. Yvonne took a cup and before taking a sip, looked at me over the steam. "Listen, what if all of this is just a mistake?" "What exactly?" "Well, our pattern. What if we're just 2 people who want too badly to see meaning in chaos? What if, without the buses, rain, and pasta, we're just us?" I looked at her. In the light of the fair's garlands, she looked frighteningly real. No more mysterious girl from the cafe. This was Yvonne, who was also afraid that reality would turn out to be duller than our legend. "Yvonne," I took the empty cup from her and set it on the edge of the parapet. "I spent all day today trying to convince myself that I didn't care whether you showed up or not. I analyzed the probability of your appearance down to the 4th decimal place. And you know what the result was?" "What?" "Math said you would come. But my heart said that if you didn't, I'd still go to that same cafe and sit there until you materialized, just to steal my table. We've long since moved beyond meaning in chaos. We're creating the chaos ourselves." She smiled, This time, not ironically, but in a way that finally scrambled all my logical circuits. Okay, that was almost convincing. Only almost? For full conviction, you need a little more decisiveness when it comes to closing the distance. That was a direct challenge, and this time, the city decided to play along. Suddenly, the fountains on the embankment were lit up, and the sound of water drowned out all the other fair noise. We stood very close. I could smell her perfume, something tart with notes of bergamot, completely unlike the sweet dessert I had once attributed to her. You do realize that if I do this now, there's no going back to just coincidences? I asked, closing the distance. Sam, you're thinking too much about escape routes for a man who's been standing in the center of my life for 3 weeks. And I kissed her. It wasn't like a movie scene. It was too cold. My nose was a little frozen. And somewhere in the background, the Radiohead fan was still wailing away. But it was better than any perfect moment, because it was intentional. When we pulled apart, Yvonne looked at me, adjusted my scarf, and said quietly, "Well, there it is. Officially, we're no longer a statistical anomaly. We're now the main storyline." We walked for another 2 hours, talked about serious things, laughed at stupid jokes, and even tried to win a stuffed bear at a shooting gallery. I failed. Yvonne called my aim statistically negligible. And when I walked her home, I realized that the best thing about a planned date wasn't the absence of surprises, but that now every surprise belonged only to the two of us. "Next time, meet at the library?" she asked at her doorway. "Only if you're sitting there with a pen in your mouth, looking like you hate all living things." "Deal. Good night, Sam." "Good night, Yvonne." I walked home, catching myself thinking that tomorrow I would be looking for her again. But now I didn't need to rely on luck. Now I had Yvonne. And that was the most incredible coincidence of all. When the magic of random coincidences is replaced by everyday certainty, the most dangerous period of any relationship begins. It's the moment when you no longer rely on the whims of the transportation system or bad weather to see each other. Now you have each other's keys, each other's class schedules, and, the most terrifying thing, the right to call at 3 in the afternoon just because. Many believe that at this point, romance evaporates, giving way to domesticity. But in our case, the city seemed to have decided that we were its favorite series, and it had no intention of canceling the show just because the main characters had finally sorted out their feelings. A month passed. Yvonne and I had become that couple I used to look at with mild skepticism. We finished each other's sentences and exchanged glances that replaced whole paragraphs of text. But the architecture of our relationship was still built on the ruins of those very impossible encounters. It turned out that Yvonne in daily life was an explosive mixture of structural perfectionism and creative chaos. She could draw up the perfect exhibition schedule 6 months in advance, but forget where her keys were in her own bag. "Sam, this isn't chaos," she declared one day, when I found her phone in the fridge for the 3rd time that evening. "It's the deconstruction of space. I'm testing how gadgets interact with low temperatures." "Your deconstruction is going to lead to me keeping an Excel spreadsheet of your belongings," I grumbled. "Oh, the politician is talking bureaucracy. How unexpected." The real test of our magnetism happened on the outskirts of the city. I needed to pick up a rare medication from my mother at a pharmacy whose existence I had learned about only an hour earlier. This was a neighborhood I had never visited, a gray industrial zone where even the pigeons looked like they were disappointed in life. I walked inside, feeling like a pioneer in the desert. The pharmacy was empty, smelling of alcohol and melancholy. And there, in the cough syrup section, stood a girl. She was studying the ingredients of a bottle with such genuine contempt that I would have recognized that back of her head even in complete darkness. I stopped a few steps away and cleared my throat. Yvonne flinched, turned around, and her face reflected a whole range of emotions, from shock to utter defeat. No, she said, lowering the bottle. This cannot be happening. I came here because it's the only place that still has my specific face cream. This is the other end of the world, Sam. It seems the city has officially recognized us as a single biological species and refuses to separate our roots. I couldn't suppress a laugh. This is no longer romance. This is some kind of quantum entanglement. We're like those particles that react to each other from a distance. We walked out of the pharmacy hand in hand, and I understood. Even when we stopped waiting for coincidences, they continued to find us. As if the universe was winking at us, reminding us how it all began. The final chord sounded on that same rainy Friday, exactly 3 months after our first meeting. Without planning it, we both ended up at that very cafe where the great table theft had once occurred. The rain was pouring just as heavily. Inside was just as crowded and smelled of cinnamon. We walked in together and, wonder of wonders, our historic table by the window was free. But before we could reach it, some guy, clearly frozen and flustered, threw his wet umbrella on a chair and headed for the counter. Yvonne looked at the umbrella, then at me. That same glint of architectural challenge sparked in her eyes. "Don't even think about it," I whispered. "Sam, it's tradition. It's hooliganism." She walked over to the table, carefully moved the umbrella to the windowsill, and calmly sat down on the chair. When the guy returned with his coffee and froze in exactly the same pose I had once frozen in, Yvonne looked up at him and gave him that same smile, calm, bright, and absolutely disarming. "Oh," said the guy, "I think that was my table." "That depends on how attached you are to the concept of ownership in an overcrowded cafe," Yvonne replied, using my own words. I stood behind her, barely holding back my laughter. The guy looked as if she had just stolen not just a table, but his faith in humanity. Okay, I give up." I stepped forward and put my hand on Yvonne's shoulder. "Sorry, man. My girlfriend is a professional territory occupier. Join us. There's room for 3. We sat there for 2 hours. The guy turned out to be an aspiring writer, and we discussed plot structure with him at length. Yvonne, of course, criticized the architecture of his fictional cities. And when we finally stepped out into the evening city, Yvonne pressed against me, hiding under my umbrella. "You know what's the most important thing in this story?" she asked. "That I always check whether your phone screen is off now?" "No, that we're no longer strangers. We're the people who create our own coincidences." I looked at her, the girl from the bus, from the library, from the supermarket, from the pharmacy at the edge of the world. And I understood that in a world full of chaos and random numbers, finding your person isn't luck. It's the art of noticing. "Hey, Yvonne," I said, stopping at the entrance to the metro. She smiled that same smile with which it all began. "Hey, Sam." We went down the stairs, and I knew for certain, wherever we went, we would always find our way to each other, even if the city had to break all the trams and flood all the streets again. Because in the end, the most important encounters are the ones we choose ourselves, even if it all started with a stolen table.
1, 2, 3. Our own coincidence. Oh, we made it. Pouring rain, packed cafe. I left my jacket on the chair. Came back with my coffee, and there was someone sitting there. She just smiled like I'd wandered into her own private space. And we split the territory, oh, in that crowded little place. Then the bus the next morning, then the pasta aisle on Sunday too. And the universe stopped pretending it was anything but true. She said, "This is aggressive marketing from fate. This can't be chance." And I knew Oh, I knew, oh, I was caught in something's dance. She texted from a number I didn't recognize. Said the girl from the cafe, the bus, keep up, no surprise. And I knew, oh, I knew, oh, I knew right then that the coincidences weren't coincidence again. We made our own coincidence, oh, our own coincidence. We stopped blaming the city, stopped pretending it made sense. She'd buy 2 cups of coffee by accident, I'd take the longer road. And we both knew, oh, we both knew where the secret story showed. We weren't strangers sharing tables in the rain anymore. We were 2 people choosing what we'd been calling chance before. We made our own coincidence, oh, our own coincidence. And the best thing that ever happened wasn't luck, it was intent. Our own coincidence. Missed a tram 'cause I dropped my card and she watched the whole thing fall. Said next one's 18 minutes, that's a hole in your biography, that's all. So we waited in a bakery with the cinnamon and the steam, and we finally talked for real, oh, with no escape route in between. She said I was looking for you too on the days I didn't see. Walked through your whole building and it was humiliating to me. And I said I waited by the library for an extra 30, pretending to read. And we laughed 'cause we were idiots, so, but it was mutual indeed. At the park she said, what if it's a mistake, you and me? What if without the buses and the rain we're just ordinary sea? And I said no, 'cause the math said she would come, but my heart said I'd have waited anyway till kingdom come. We made our own coincidence, oh, our own coincidence. We stopped blaming the city, stopped pretending it made sense. She'd buy 2 cups of coffee by accident, I'd take the longer road. And we both knew, oh, we both knew where the secret story showed. We weren't strangers sharing tables in the rain anymore. We were 2 people choosing what we'd been calling chance before. We made our own coincidence, oh, our own coincidence. And the best thing that ever happened wasn't luck, it was intent. By the fountains on the embankment with the garlands lit up gold, she said, if you do this now, there's no going back to the cold of just coincidence. And I said, you're thinking too much about escape routes for a man who's been standing in your life this much. And I kissed her, and it wasn't like a movie, my nose was cold. And the radio head guy was wailing, oh, but it was ours to hold, 'cause it was intentional, oh, it was finally chosen. Not the city's little game, or not a door left open. She said, we're not a statistical anomaly anymore. And I said, we're the main storyline. And I meant it to the core. We made our own coincidence, oh, oh, our own coincidence. Even when we stopped waiting, oh, it still made perfect sense. She stole one more table just to keep the tradition true. And I said, join us, there's room for 3, 'cause now I always knew that finding your person in a city full of chaos and noise isn't luck, oh, it isn't luck, it's the art of the choice. We made our own coincidence, oh, oh, our own coincidence. And it all began, oh, with a stolen table and a glance. Our own coincidence. Hey Yvonne, hey Sam, We weren't strangers anymore. We were the people who create their own way back to each other. Our own coincidence. Our own coincidence. We made it. Oh, we made it. We made our own